As a data analyst, I know that the insights from data are only as good as the data itself. Garbage in, garbage out. It's an old adage, and we've probably all heard it at one point in our lives. But I want to dig into polling, from the technical challenge of data collection to what happens behind the scenes before the results even reach us. Now, firstly, there's always the issue of data quality. This starts with sampling. Polls rely on samples of the population, but achieving this balance is much trickier than it sounds, and any gaps in representation can quickly skew results. This makes a poll bad. Now, think about this. If the poll only surveys people, let's say, with landlines, is this going to exclude younger demographics or urban residents who primarily use mobile phones and maybe don't even have a landline? If you're only talking to people with landlines, are you going to be biasing your results towards certain demographics? Would that create a skewed perspective? Maybe even show a political leaning that doesn't actually reflect the entire population? Now, is this intentional or unintentional? Maybe if you designed an experiment to only speak to people on landlines, you have a good idea of who you're going to talk to, and therefore you're going to skew the results intentionally. Also, maybe you're not doing this intentionally. This could be completely accidental and it was the only method you had available to you. But the point is, without knowing how the poll survey is conducted, without realizing some of these biases that can be introduced, how can you really believe the results that come out of a certain poll? But sampling isn't the only technical challenge. Poll data collection can introduce subtle issues that also affect the reliability of results. Things like question wording, response rates, and even the time of day can alter responses in unexpected ways. For instance, leading questions can prime respondents to answer in certain ways, while low response rates can lead to overrepresentation of more vocal groups. Now, again, these are subtleties and nuances, and a very excellent designer of a poll would be aware of this when putting it together. But equally, if you don't exercise caution when designing a poll, these are the types of issues that can, I would say, corrupt the quality of the data and introduce a certain bias that makes the poll not very representative of all. Then you've got to think about data processing. This is where even more changes can happen. Poll data often goes through several layers of cleaning and filtering to handle outliers or incomplete responses. And data cleaning, as I know, is hugely important, but with each adjustment, whether that's excluding responses, adjusting weights, or interpreting ambiguous answers, you could introduce a layer of bias, whether this is unintentional or not. And this is especially true with adjustments for non-responses, where a pollster could estimate how non-respondents might have answered. This isn't representative in any way. This is, in my opinion, one of the big issues with polls. There's this opacity as to what's going on underneath the layer of where the poll is being conducted. You don't know whether this is happening or not. So by the time you see the final numbers, that data may have been touched by several people, each making small decisions that shape the end result. And this process isn't inherently malicious, but each step adds a layer of subjectivity, making it crucial to understand exactly how the data was processed. That's where transparency becomes so critical. Often the raw data behind polls isn't publicly available, which means we can't analyze it ourselves to check for biases or inconsistencies. Imagine if a poll was conducted and we all had access to all the raw data. We could then produce our analyses, produce our results, and we'd be able to tell very quickly if we felt that somebody had skewed the results deliberately or had an intentional bias in their analyses, because we would have the raw data. And essentially, raw data does not lie. Look at the data without any interference, any cleaning, and it is as pure as it gets. Now, the problem is data is very rarely accessible in its raw form. And this is one of the issues with polls. Without that transparency, we're left trusting somebody else's interpretation, an interpretation that may well have been altered along the way, whether that was deliberate, intentional, or not. Of course, we all have biases. Even the people conducting these polls have political biases. Nobody is entirely neutral. So polls are powerful tools. They provide snapshots of public opinion that can influence everything from policy to media coverage. But remember, these snapshots are so complex, and they're shaped by the choices made in data collection, processing, and of course, presentation. So next time you see a poll and it's distilled down to one number, think critically. Ask about the methods, consider potential biases, and be cautious about taking these results at face value. After all, it's a black box. You have no idea what went into conducting this poll. Was it 1 million people? Was it 100 people? What was the method of communicating these people? Were they adding their own answers for non-respondents? Was it done at a particular time of day to make sure you captured certain people that might be home or might not be home? All of these are the types of thoughts you have to think about when seeing something that's really neatly presented in an infographic. But that poll is actually the tip of the iceberg, and beneath that are a layer of decisions that could very greatly affect how reliable and representative that data is. So in the end, in my opinion, it all comes back to transparency. Access to raw data will allow us to hold polls accountable to a higher standard, but until then, remember that data isn't always as straightforward as it seems. Thanks for watching, hope you've enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.